the evil that is amidst us and is in some cases seeming to have the better of it with the good. And why we can't let that stand, why we need as a people to get our bearings, take aboard the findings, and begin a process that will ultimately result in holding the evil, the people perpetrating it, accountable.
The Durham Report that we've been waiting for since we were kids, here it comes out, and it corroborates what we all knew, but it carefully corroborates the truth that the Russia stuff, the FBI investigation, that this was all politically motivated, that there was deep corruption, there is deep corruption in the FBI, in the deep state, wherever you look. So I guess the question becomes, what about it? What do you, Frank Gaffney, who live a little bit in this world more than I do, what do you make of this?
I think it's a pretty strong indictment, if I can use that expression.
Is that the title of your book, The Indictment?
It is, but it happens to apply here. An indictment of the state of our rule of law.
Yeah.
You know, of course, that if a Republican president, a Republican administration, a Republican FBI had been involved in anything remotely like this kind of monkey business, for want of a better expression, or more to the point, criminal misconduct,
Yeah.
people would be walking the plank. They would be going to jail. They would be doing hard time for protracted periods. But that does not apply to Democrats.
Now, we all say that, but do we not have any glimmer of hope that it could, to some extent, that someone, Josh Hawley, Senator Josh Hawley, who's a hero, he has said that these folks must be held accountable. There are a number of figures in Congress who have been heroic and outspoken about this. So the question is, what can be done? What do you see, I mean, immediately coming out of this? Because this is, I guess the point is that it's kind of like when Tucker showed the images of the QAnon shaman, wandering around being led by the Capitol Police. For a lot of people who are not into these weeds, they thought, what? And this was a wake-up call. Naomi Wolf wrote a beautiful essay apologizing for her take on January 6th that she hadn't known. I think there are people like that with this, that there are tons of Americans, you and I won't bump into them because we tend to travel in circles where people know this stuff, but there are tons of Americans who said, well, I think there's something to it, or I don't know, or I don't, and then suddenly it's so clear that you even have the legacy media, the major networks reporting on this. There are a number of Americans for whom that is the news, and I think that's not nothing.
It remains to be seen whether it is or isn't nothing. But let me just say, the thesis of my book, which we'll talk about shortly, is prosecuting this kind of misconduct, or worse, really,
it's far worse than misconduct.
In the court of public opinion, is not nothing. I think it is vitally important.
Okay.
I think it is a precursor to other corrective actions.
Okay.
Notably, if the public in fact says, this is not right, this is not America, this is not consistent with my values, let alone the Constitution of our country, then the corrective action presumably over time becomes one that is adjudicated, probably starting by throwing the bums out, getting yourself a new government that is going to live up to their oath of office to support and defend the Constitution, not to betray it at every turn. And that's when you get a Department of Justice that might actually prosecute these things. I'm not a lawyer, and I don't know when statutes of limitation run out and all the rest of it, but I do think that there will be please God, a reckoning in the sense that people will have clarity.
Yeah.
Not necessarily because of what John Durham has said, but because this case is going to be prosecuted in the court of public opinion.
Well, I feel, very, very timidly hopeful in the sense that I don't have this big triumphalist, well, we're going to get them. But I think that every day people are waking up to the idea that we are in a war. We're dealing with evil. And every day more people wake up. There are tons of people, I promise you, who it wasn't until Tucker aired the footage that had a completely different view of January 6th. It took until that recently. And I think this is the kind of thing we're talking about. Every day, more and more people are waking up. We'll be right back talking to Frank Gaffney. The new book is The Indictment. I don't know that we want to dismiss this Durham report too quickly. In other words, he has been very, very slow and methodical and has come out with this. And now, the question is, of course, what's going to be done. But you were talking about the court of public opinion. Part of this, these things need to settle. The new narrative needs to kind of find its way through the culture. But I think when you have the main networks reporting on this, that's just not a small thing.
They're reporting on it, but I'm not sure that it is advancing the public understanding as much as they're emphasizing that there's nothing to see here, folks, because nobody's being prosecuted. In fact, there's a lot to see here. As you went through the litany of things that he found, even if he didn't prosecute anybody for having done those bad things, they are bad things.
Now, first of all, when you say nobody's being prosecuted, why is nobody being prosecuted? What am I missing?
I'm not entirely clear.
Is that his job? Is that Durham's job?
Yeah.
So why would somebody like Durham...
He brought 3 different charges against individuals, maybe more charges, but 3 individuals.
Right.
He was able to put 1 away with a slap on the wrist, I guess, mostly, and then 2 walked. And I don't know whether that had something to do with the feeling that he was not going to be able to prosecute anybody else successfully, and therefore he wasn't going to do it, or whether, there are theories that the deep state got to him. I don't know.
But he officially said, as he puts out this report yesterday, that we are not seeking any
further criminal prosecutions, as I understand it. The case is closed now.
So that is confusing to me, I have to say.
Well, and I think it's confusing a lot of the American people as well. And that's why I say, if this is indeed the beginning of a new kind of prosecution in the court of public opinion, and it's all about educating the American people as to this double standard, as to, and you put it so well, as usual, the evil that is amidst us and is in some cases seeming to have the better of it with the good. And why we can't let that stand, why we need as a people to get our bearings, take aboard the findings, and begin a process that will ultimately result in holding the evil, the people perpetrating it, accountable.
Well, this is, I don't understand really how the law works and how these things that we're talking about work. So so he makes this investigation and he says he's not going to prosecute anybody. Would it not be possible for someone like a Josh Hawley or a Ted Cruz or somebody in Congress, Jim Jordan, to do something about this? I mean, when somebody puts a report out like this, can legislators not do something about that?
Well, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a legislator. I think the answer is, could they do something? Yeah, they can do something. I think what they probably will think they can do is what I'm talking about. Doing hearings, further exposing what he found, having him testify, explaining, how far he thought he could take the prosecution and so on. But in the end, they can't bring charges against people that he is almost certainly able to finger as responsible for perpetrating criminal activity.
Yeah. I guess, what do they make it? In other words, what do you think his narrative would be like? The FBI got out of hand. In other words, to me and to you, this is treason. This is basically putting a bullet in the head of we the people, put a bullet in the head of Uncle Sam and Lady Liberty. That's what this is. I mean, if you subvert the will of the American people in an election, or you make it impossible for the man whom they elected to do the things that they elected him to do, that is absolutely treasonous. This is as bad as it gets. So it just seems to me that it's confusing that Durham wouldn't be. I mean, some people are such eggheads that they don't have that fire. It's what makes them so methodical. That's the good part. But then they don't have the fire to do anything about it, or to say that we're on a crusade to save America. They just say, "Here's the report. Thank you very much."
Yeah. Look, he is widely regarded, certainly going into this special prosecutor role, as an exceedingly exacting attorney and prosecutor. And all I can say is, if he has made the case, as he seems to have concluded it, then if there is a will to prosecute the case beyond what's in evidence at the moment, which, as I say, I think only comes about if the American people get behind this, which in turn requires them to actually understand what's happened here, which I think is probably going to result in some of the members of Congress you've mentioned saying, my job, I can't bring charges, I can't prosecute these guys, but I can set the public straight as to what yet needs to be done and get a mandate. We'll talk about it in the context of the book. Mandates for course corrections is something that I'm really big on, going back to my time watching Ronald Reagan get a mandate for a course correction on the Soviet portfolio. We need that now, I think, both in matters foreign and domestic.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt. I mean, we're just talking about this because this report just came out. And look, it's all related. The corruption, I mean, you know, the guff that I took for saying people should vote for Trump when Hillary was the opponent, I thought, do people have any idea of the level of corruption of Hillary Clinton? They don't care. They're cynical. These are, unfortunately, very, very wide-ranging horrors. They are not merely this or merely that. We'll be right back talking to Frank Gaffney. The book is The Indictment. Everything you write in this book is true. Everything in the Durham Report is true. These things come out, but the question over and over, okay, how do we get it out to more people so that most Americans have some sense that criminals have taken over their country? I mean, I remember there's a line in my Bonhoeffer book where someone, I should remember who, but says, my dear, criminals have taken over our country. You know, at some point they look around and go, oh, we didn't really understand what was happening, but suddenly we realize criminals have taken over the country, and now it's too late. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's necessarily too late in America if enough people actually realize it.
It's awfully late.
It's dramatically late.
And I have to tell you that my own conclusion about this, in the context specifically of the threat from the Chinese Communist Party and their friends, is that if we have God on our side, it's certainly not too late. If we don't, it may be way too late.
Oh, no. And if we don't have God on our side,
have we so given him cause for not being on our side that it is? But look, you're asking the right question. When the media is largely in the hands of people who do not want the truth that is being provided to be widely accessible, most Americans are not going to know. My only suggestion is, in the context of, in particular, these examples of truly existential threats to our republic, the next best thing we have is elections in which we have candidates running on platforms that reflect the truth, that have to get some coverage, that certainly are getting exposure to the American people, and hopefully will mobilize them to act.
Okay, but of course, I can hear people listening to this program. I can hear you folks out there saying, yeah, but elections are no longer things that we can trust. In other words, the last election, many elections, but the last presidential election most clearly seems to have been stolen. The evidence seems dramatic that the Democrats, on a host of levels, not just voting machines or ballot stuffing, but that they have really gone over to the dark side where they're willing to do anything. And so this is another battle we have to fight, is for fair elections.